"I don't need your money, sir." Michael stopped mid-reach, the $20 bill, still pinched between his fingers, held out toward the register like an offering no one had asked for. The girl did not look away. She stood at the counter of the small grocery store, both hands gripping a brown paper bag pressed against her chest. She was 11, maybe 12, thin at the shoulders, her hair pulled back in two tight braids. Her eyes were steady and unblinking. Not angry, not afraid, just certain. The cashier glanced between them. The fluorescent light above the register flickered once. Michael lowered his hand slowly, but the girl had already turned away. 7 minutes earlier, Michael Whitaker was standing in a place he had never been before. Not a dangerous place, not a remarkable one, just a small grocery store on the corner of a street his driver had turned down after the main road was blocked. The car had stalled 2 blocks back, something electrical under the hood. His driver was on the phone with a mechanic, and Michael had stepped out to find water. The store was narrow. 1 door in, 1 door out. A handwritten sign near the entrance read "Cash Only" in thick black marker. The fluorescent light above the door buzzed and flickered in a slow, unsteady rhythm, casting a pale pulse across the shelved walls. The floor was tile, cracked in places, patched in others, with mismatched squares that no longer pretended to be the same color. Near the back, a rotating fan pushed warm air in lazy circles. The glass display case by the register was scratched so deeply that the candy bars behind it blurred into shapes. The air smelled like laundry detergent and something sweet. Cheap candy, maybe. Or floor cleaner that had been mopped that morning and never quite dried. Michael walked the single aisle slowly. His shoes, black leather, freshly shined, clicked against the chipped tile. His dark suit jacket hung open. The watch on his left wrist caught the light each time he moved his arm. He scanned the shelves for water. He found 3 brands he had never seen before, lined up between off-brand sodas and a row of fruit juice boxes with faded labels. He picked up a bottle, turned it over, checked the label the way a man checks things when he is used to knowing exactly what he puts into his body. He set it back. He picked up another. Same brand, different size. Turned that one over too. Then he put it down beside the first. Behind the counter sat a woman. Older, maybe 60, with reading glasses low on her nose and a calm, unhurried expression. She did not greet him. She did not need to. The store was small enough that his presence had already been noted, measured, and filed. Michael felt it. The quiet attention. Not hostile, just aware. He was used to being recognized. In boardrooms, at galas, and conference halls where his name was printed on the program, here he was recognized differently, not as someone important, as someone who did not belong. He picked up the first bottle again and walked toward the counter. He reached for his wallet, then stopped. He wasn't sure if the store took cards. He looked for a card reader near the register. There wasn't one. Just the counter, the cash box, and the woman behind the glass. He felt the kind of small uncertainty that had not touched his life in years. The kind that most people dealt with every day, and he had forgotten existed. He glanced back toward the door. His car was still out there somewhere, broken and waiting. He was in no hurry. There was nowhere else to be. That was when he noticed the girl. She was already standing at the register, her back to him. Small. Thin at the shoulders, the way children are thin when they have grown upward faster than outward. 2 tight braids pulled close to her scalp, each one ending in a small, dark elastic. She wore a jacket that was clean but too large, the sleeves pushed up past her wrists. On the counter in front of her sat a brown paper bag open at the top. Inside, Michael could see 3 things: a small carton of milk, a loaf of white bread, and a single banana slightly spotted resting against the side of the bag. Next to the bag, lined up in a careful row across the countertop, were coins. Quarters, dimes, nickels, a few pennies. The girl was counting them. Her lips moved slightly, with each one forming numbers that made no sound. She touched each coin as she counted, sliding it with the tip of her finger from the left side to the right, one by one. Each coin flat, each one touching the next. No gaps, no overlaps. It was the kind of counting that came from practice. Not school practice, life practice. The kind that develops when every cent has already been assigned a job before it leaves your hand. She arranged them in a straight line across the scratched glass. Then she stopped. Her finger hovered over the last penny. She looked up at the register screen, then down at the coins, then at the screen again. Her lips pressed together. The woman behind the counter, Mrs. Edna, looked at the coins, then at the girl. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted, barely visible. "You short again, baby." The girl did not answer with words. She gave a small nod. Quick, tight, almost invisible. The kind of nod a child gives when she does not want the moment to last longer than it has to. Then, without hesitation, she reached into the brown bag and pulled out the banana. She placed it on the counter apart from the rest, gently, the way someone removes a piece from a set and puts it aside. Not thrown, not dropped, placed, with the quiet finality of a decision that had already been made before it was made. She looked at the milk, then at the bread. She did not look at the banana again. "Just the milk and bread, please." Her voice was clear, steady, no wobble in it, no sadness performed for anyone watching. Just a choice made and delivered the way she had probably made it many times before, in this same store, at this same counter, with these same coins arranged on this same scratched glass. Mrs. Edna did not argue. She did not offer to cover the difference. She rang it up. The register beeped twice. She folded the top of the bag closed and slid it across the counter. The girl took it with both hands. She pressed it against her chest, the brown paper crinkling softly against her jacket. She held it the way someone holds a thing they cannot afford to drop. Michael stood 3 steps behind her. The water bottle was still in his hand. He had watched the entire thing. The counting, the pause, the banana placed back. The choice between feeding herself and feeding someone else made without a single word of explanation. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He stepped forward and placed a $20 bill flat on the counter beside the register. "Let me get that for her." His voice was calm, generous, the kind of tone a man uses when he believes he is doing something simple and decent. The girl turned her head. She looked at the bill. Then she looked at Michael. Her eyes were dark and steady. She did not blink. She did not smile. She did not look grateful. For a moment, no one in the store moved. Then the girl turned back to Mrs. Edna. "Just the milk and bread, please." She said it again, the same words, the same tone. As if the $20 on the counter did not exist. As if the man who placed it there had not spoken at all. Michael tilted his head slightly. "It's just a few dollars," he said. His voice was gentle. He meant it kindly. He believed it was kind. The girl turned fully toward him. She looked up at his face. She was 11, maybe 12. Her expression carried no anger, no shyness, no gratitude. Just a calm, practiced stillness that belonged to someone much older. "I didn't ask for help, sir." The sentence did not carry anger. It carried something older, the kind of pride that had been taught early, reinforced daily, and worn like a second skin. Not rudeness, not defiance. It was the quiet certainty of a child who had learned that the things you earn with your own hands are the only things no one can take back. Mrs. Edna watched from behind the register. Her hands rested flat on the counter. She did not intervene. She did not smile. She had seen this before. Different man, different amount, same mistake. The kind of help that comes from above and lands like weight. She had watched it play out dozens of times. A well-meaning stranger sees a child counting coins. The stranger reaches for a wallet. The stranger places money on the counter and waits for the warmth that is supposed to follow. The thank you. The tearful nod. The moment that makes the giving feel complete. But that warmth did not come. Because the girl had never been taught that accepting things from strangers was safe. She had been taught the opposite. She had been taught by experience, not by lectures, that every hand that reached toward her carried a cost she could not see until later. A social worker who showed up with a smile and left with questions. A neighbor who brought food and then told the whole building what the inside of the apartment looked like. A church volunteer who offered groceries and then asked where her mother was, as if the groceries had purchased the right to know. In the world this child lived in, nothing was free. Everything had a price. And the price of accepting help was often more expensive than the thing you needed. Michael did not know any of that yet. He only knew that a child had looked him in the eye and said no. And that the no had not felt like rejection. It had felt like something he was not yet equipped to understand. The girl picked up her bag. She tucked it under one arm. She turned toward the door, pushed it open with her free hand, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The small bell above the frame jingled once behind her. The door swung shut. The store went quiet. Mrs. Edna did not speak right away. She let the silence settle. Then she picked up the banana the girl had left on the counter and placed it back on the shelf behind her. Slowly, the way someone handles a thing that still belongs to the person who set it down. "You meant well," she said. Not looking at him. Not accusing. Just stating. Michael did not respond. "Most folks do," she continued. "But meaning well and doing right ain't always the same thing. That child counts her money because that's the one thing in her life she controls. You take that from her, even with a smile and a $20 bill, and you take the only piece of ground she's standing on." She looked at him then. Not unkindly, but without cushion. "You didn't offer her help," she said. "You offered yourself a feeling, and she could tell the difference." The words hit Michael the way clean water hits a wound. Not with violence, with clarity. He stood there, the water bottle still in his hand, and realized he had nothing to say. Not because there was nothing to say, because everything he might have said would have proven her right. Michael stood still. The $20 bill lay untouched on the counter between them. Mrs. Edna looked at it, then at him. Her expression was not unkind, but it carried no comfort. It was the face of a woman who understood something the man in front of her had not yet begun to learn. He stared at the door for a long moment. Through the glass, the sidewalk was empty now. The girl had already turned the corner. Gone. As if she had never been there at all, except that the coins were gone from the counter, and the banana was back on the shelf, and Michael felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He turned back to Mrs. Edna. "Does she come here often?" Mrs. Edna studied him, carefully. The way you study someone before deciding how much truth they deserve. Every Tuesday and Friday. Same list, same money counted twice. Never short by more than $1. Never asks for credit. Never takes what she can't pay for herself. She folded her arms lightly on the counter. "That girl walks in here with exact change or close to it every time. She knows the price of milk down to the cent. She knows when the bread goes on sale. She knows which bananas are cheapest because they're the ones nobody else wants. Spotted ones, soft ones. She picks them on purpose." Michael listened. He did not interrupt. Mrs. Edna continued. "And when she's short, she doesn't ask. She puts something back. Always the thing for herself. Never the milk. The milk is for her brother. She let that sit." Michael looked toward the glass door again. The sidewalk was still empty. The sun had shifted and the store felt dimmer now, the fluorescent light working harder against the fading afternoon. "Where does she live?" Mrs. Edna did not answer that question. She adjusted her glasses slowly, then picked up the cloth she kept folded beneath the register. She began wiping the counter where the coins had been moving in small, deliberate circles, as if clearing something that went deeper than dust. "That ain't mine to tell." She paused. Then, without looking up, she added, "That child has been paying for her own groceries since she was 8 years old. Every coin counted, every item chosen. You don't take that away from somebody just by making it easy." The words settled between them like something placed on the counter that neither of them could pick up. Michael did not respond. He had built companies worth billions. He had closed deals that made grown men quit. He had solved problems that crossed oceans and employed thousands and moved markets before the morning news. But he had never stood in a store like this one and been made to feel like the one who didn't understand. He had been rejected in business before. Deals that collapsed. Partners who walked. Investors who looked him in the eye and said no without blinking. None of it had felt like this. He had never been refused by a child holding a bag of bread. He picked up his $20 bill. He folded it once and slid it back into his wallet. He closed the wallet slowly and returned it to his jacket pocket. It felt heavier than before. Outside, the late afternoon sun sat low over the rooftops. The air was warm and still. Michael stepped onto the sidewalk and looked in the direction the girl had gone. His car was 2 blocks back. His driver leaned against the hood, phone pressed to his ear. The mechanic had not arrived. Michael did not walk toward the car. He walked the other way. Not quickly, not with any clear purpose. Just in the same direction the girl had gone. He kept his distance, half a block behind, maybe more. He told himself he was just walking. Just getting air while he waited for the car. He almost believed it. The neighborhood changed as he moved deeper into it. The sidewalk narrowed. Cracks ran through the concrete in long, uneven lines filled with dirt and grass that grew sideways through the seams. Trees lined the street, large and full, their branches reaching over chain-link fences and across power lines. Some front yards were neat, swept, trimmed. A few had flower pots on the steps. Others were cluttered with bicycles and plastic chairs. A television played through a screen door propped open with a brick. The smell of something fried drifted from a house on the corner. Oil and seasoning, warm and familiar. A woman sat on her porch, steps watching the street without watching anything in particular, a glass of something iced, sweating in her hand. Two boys on bicycles pedaled past, fast, laughing at something only they could hear. It was not a bad neighborhood. It was a tired one. The kind of place where things worked, but only because the people inside them refused to let go. Michael kept walking. He saw the girl turn down a narrow side street. He slowed. He stopped at the corner and watched from a distance. She walked to the side entrance of a small house, set back from the road. The paint on the doorframe was cracked and curling, the wood beneath it gray. A potted plant sat on the top, stepped the soil dry, but the leaves still green. A pair of small shoes were lined up neatly beside the door, toes pointing outward. The girl stopped. She shifted the bag to one arm. Then she knocked. 2 quick knocks. A pause, then 3 more. A pattern, a code that belonged only to the people inside that house. A moment passed. The sound of wheels on a hard floor. Then, the door opened, slowly pulled inward by a thin hand. An older woman sat in a wheelchair just behind the threshold. Her hair was white, pulled back loosely. Her left arm rested still in her lap. Her right hand gripped the door frame as she leaned forward to see. The girl stepped inside. "Hey, Nana." "Got the milk." She held the bag out, and the older woman took it with her working hand, settling it into her lap. The girl reached down and adjusted the blanket that had slipped from the old woman's knees. A small motion, automatic. The kind of thing you do without thinking because you have done it every day for as long as you can remember. The door began to close. Just before it shut, Michael saw the girl press her hand briefly against the old woman's shoulder. Not a hug, not a pat, just a touch. The kind that says, "I'm here," without needing the words. The door clicked shut. Michael stood at the end of the alley, half in shadow, half in the last reach of the afternoon light. He had not been seen. The girl had not looked back. The old woman had not looked past the door. He had seen enough. The small house, the wheelchair, the knock that was a code. The bag, chosen with the precision of someone who knew what she could afford and what she would go without. The blanket adjusted without being asked. The voice that said, "Hey, Nana," the way other children said, "I'm home," except this child said it like she was reporting for duty. He stood there for a long moment, his hands at his sides, his suit jacket open, his expensive shoes resting on a sidewalk that had not been repaved in years. He turned around, but the image stayed. 3 days passed. Michael did not forget. He tried. He went back to his office. He sat through meetings. He signed papers and returned calls and did everything a man in his position was supposed to do. But somewhere between the spreadsheets and the conference calls, the image kept coming back. A girl counting coins on a scratched glass counter. A banana placed back on the shelf without a word. A voice that said, "I didn't ask for help, sir," with more certainty than most adults he had ever met. On Thursday morning, he drove back. This time, he did not take the company car. He drove himself. A gray sedan his wife used for errands. He wore a plain jacket, dark jeans, sneakers, no tie, no watch. He told himself he was just passing through the area, just curious, just checking. He did not believe himself. The bell above the door chimed when he walked in. Mrs. Edna was behind the register, same as before. She was sorting receipts into a small metal box, her reading glasses low on her nose. She looked up when he entered. She did not seem surprised. "You came back." Michael stopped near the counter. He picked up a pack of gum from the display rack, turned it over. "Set it down." I couldn't stop thinking about her. Mrs. Edna closed the receipt box. She folded her hands on the counter and studied him for a long moment. Not suspicion exactly. More like measurement. The way a woman measures a man when she is deciding whether his words match his weight. "Most people don't think past the first look," she said. Michael pulled out the plastic chair wedged between the magazine rack and the wall. It was faded white, cracked along one armrest. He sat down without asking permission. Mrs. Edna did not object. "Tell me about her," he said. Mrs. Edna did not rush. She spoke the way people speak when a story is familiar but still heavy every time it leaves their mouth. "Her name is Kalia. She's 11. Lives with her grandmother, Ruth. Everyone calls her Nana Ruth. Been with her since she was 4. That's when the mother left. Went to Charlotte with a man she met online. Said she'd come back for the girl. Said she'd send money. Neither one happened. Michael listened. He did not interrupt. Father was never around. Not in the picture from the start. No name on the birth certificate. No address. No phone number. Just gone the way some people are gone before they were ever really there. Mrs. Edna adjusted her glasses. 2 years ago, Nana Ruth had a stroke. Left side went out. She's in a wheelchair now. Can't cook, can't clean, can barely get from the bed to the kitchen on a good day. Doctor said she needs physical therapy 3 times a week. She goes once when somebody can drive her. The other 2 times she just sits. And Kalia takes care of her. Mrs. Edna nodded slowly. Kalia does the shopping. You seen that yourself. She does the cooking too. Nothing fancy. Rice, beans, whatever's on sale. She washes clothes in the bathtub because the machine broke 8 months ago and nobody's come to fix it. She walks her little cousin Jalen to school every morning before she goes to her own. Michael frowned. Cousin. Jalen. 5 years old. His mama is Ruth's youngest daughter. She's been locked up going on 2 years now. Possession charge. Judge gave her 4 years. So the boy ended up with Nana Ruth, which really means he ended up with Kalia. Michael leaned back in the chair. The plastic groaned under his weight. How do they manage Mrs.? Edna looked at him directly, not unkindly, but without softening. Nana gets a disability check, $12.47 a month. Rent on that little place is $8.50. Electric runs about 90 more in summer when the window unit's going. That leaves $307 for food, soap, medicine, bus fare, school supplies, shoes when they wear out, and anything else that breaks or runs out in between. She paused. Let that number sit. Kalia makes it stretch. She knows what milk costs at every store in a 2-mile radius. She knows which day the bread goes half off. She knows that the spotted bananas are cheaper because nobody else wants them. She picks those on purpose. And when she's short, she puts something back. Always the thing for herself, never the milk. The milk is for Jalen. The store was quiet. A car passed outside. The fluorescent light buzzed its slow pulse overhead. Michael sat in the cracked plastic chair and felt something shift inside him that he did not have a word for yet. He had built companies that managed hundreds of millions of dollars. He had structured deals that turned decimal points into fortunes. He had read financial reports thicker than phone books and made decisions that moved markets before the morning news. But he had never once calculated what it took to feed 2 children and a woman in a wheelchair on $307 a month. He had never had to. The next morning, Michael went to a grocery store across town. Not his usual place with the wide aisles and soft lighting and staff who knew his name. A regular store closer to the neighborhood. He walked through it carefully, choosing things he thought a family might need. Milk, eggs, bread, chicken thighs, a bag of rice, bananas, apples, a box of cereal, orange juice, a bar of soap. He paid in cash and carried the 2 paper bags to his car. He drove to the house he had seen 3 days before. The narrow side street, the cracked paint around the doorframe, the dry potted plant on the top step, the small shoes lined up beside the door. He parked at the curb. He sat in the car for a moment, engine off, looking at the house. The potted plant on the top step looked the same. The small shoes were still lined up by the door. A curtain moved in the window, then went still. He gathered the bags. He walked to the side entrance and stood there for a second before he knocked. 3 plain knocks, slow, uncertain. He did not know the pattern. A moment passed. He heard something move inside. Footsteps light and quick. Then the sound stopped. He could feel someone standing on the other side of the door, deciding. The door opened halfway. Kalia stood in the gap. She wore an oversized t-shirt that hung past her elbows and shorts that reached below her knees. Her braids were the same, neat, tight. Done by her own hands, probably because no one else was there to do them. Her expression was the same too. Calm, watchful, already reading him before he had opened his mouth. She looked at him. Then, at the bags. She studied the bags the way someone studies a thing they have been offered before and learned not to trust. Her eyes moved from the bread visible at the top to the carton of eggs to the bunch of bananas poking out the side. She took it all in without reaching for any of it. Then she looked back at him. The silence lasted longer than either of them expected. Michael spoke first. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just thought I know what you thought. Her voice was not harsh. It was flat. The flatness of someone who had heard this kind of thing before and already knew the shape of what came next. "We're okay, sir. Nana says we don't take from strangers." Michael shifted the bags in his arms. "I'm not a stranger. You've seen me before." Kalia tilted her head slightly. "Seeing somebody doesn't make them not a stranger." The words landed clean. Precise. The quiet logic of a child who had learned to sort the world into categories that most adults never had to think about. Safe and unsafe. Known and unknown. And between those two categories, a distance carved not by theory, but by every hand that had ever reached toward her and then pulled back. Michael had never considered that generosity to someone who had been let down enough times could feel like a trap, that the hand reaching out could look exactly like the hand that once pulled away. The social worker who showed up with a smile and left with questions. The neighbor who brought food one week and told the whole block what she saw inside the apartment the next. The church lady who offered bags of groceries and then asked where Kalia's mama was. As if the rice and beans had purchased the right to know. In this child's world, nothing came free. Everything given arrived with a string attached. And she had learned to see the string before she ever looked at the gift. Kalia did not slam the door. She closed it gently. The latch clicked into place with a soft, careful sound. The kind of closing that carried no anger. Just a boundary drawn with the only tool she had. Michael stood on the step, both bags still in his arms, the groceries pressed against his chest. Through the thin wall he could hear the faint sound of a television, a child's voice. Then nothing. The door closed softly. But the sound stayed loud. He drove home with the bags still in the back seat. He carried them into the kitchen and set them on the island counter without unpacking them. The milk was already losing its chill. The bread sat in its plastic sleeve untouched. He had bought all of it that morning thinking it would be enough, thinking that the act of buying was the same as the act of caring, thinking that if he just showed up with the right things the door would open and stay open. Sharon was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She was working on something, but she stopped when he walked in. She looked at his face first, then at the bags, then back at his face. "What happened?" Michael leaned against the counter. He stood for a moment without speaking. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The afternoon light came through the window and fell across the floor in long, clean rectangles. She wouldn't take it. Sharon closed the laptop slowly. "Take what I bought groceries." Took them to her house. She said no, wouldn't even look at the bags. Sharon studied him. She did not look surprised. She did not look angry. She looked the way she always looked when she could see him heading towards something at full speed and wanted to slow him down before he hit it. "Michael, you can't just show up at a stranger's house with bags of food. That's not how this works." "Then, how does it work?" Sharon's voice stayed even. Level. She was not fighting him. She was trying to protect him from something he had not yet seen clearly enough to protect himself from. Think about what this looks like from the outside. A grown man nobody in that neighborhood knows. Expensive car parked at the curb. Standing on the porch of a house where 2 children and a disabled grandmother live. Holding bags of groceries that nobody asked for? What if the grandmother wakes up and thinks you're from CPS? What if the child mentions it at school and a teacher calls somebody? What if a neighbor sees you there twice and decides you're trouble? Michael opened his mouth to answer. Sharon was not finished. "You're a black man with money. She's a black child in a low-income neighborhood. I don't care how good your heart is, that combination does not get the benefit of the doubt. Not from the system. Not from the neighbors. Not from anyone looking in from the outside." The kitchen was quiet again. Michael looked at the bags on the counter. He could see the bananas through the top of the paper. He had chosen spotted ones. On purpose. Because Mrs. Edna had told him those were the kind the girl always picked. "Then, what am I supposed to do?" he said. His voice was quieter now. Not defeated, just honest. "Forget about her." Sharon met his eyes. "No, but you need to do this right. You don't help people by deciding what they need. You help by asking. Go through the community. Find who she trusts. Find the people who already take care of her, the ones who know her name and know her schedule and know which days she comes up short. Start there." She paused. Then, softer, she added, "You're not wrong for wanting to help. I see that. But wanting to help and knowing how are not the same thing. And that girl already knows the difference. That's why she closed the door. Michael sat with that. He looked at the groceries again. He looked at his wife. He thought about the door closing. Not with anger, with precision. He didn't like what Sharon said, but he knew she was right. The next morning, Michael walked into Mrs. Edna's store for the third time in a week. The bell chimed. Mrs. Edna looked up from behind the register. A faint, dry smile crossed her face. Brief and gone. You still hear Michael walked straight to the counter. He did not pretend to browse. He did not pick up a bottle of water or a pack of gum. She won't take anything from me. Good. That means she has sense. Michael looked around the store. The same narrow aisle. The same buzzing light. The same cracked tile and scratched glass. He found the plastic chair still wedged in its corner and pulled it out. He sat down heavily. Then tell me, how do I do this right, Mrs.? Edna took off her glasses. She set them on the counter and folded her arms. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a man she is deciding whether to trust with something that doesn't belong to him. You really want to know, yes. She sat back on her stool. Around here, we don't wait for somebody with a clipboard to show up and tell us who needs help. We already know. Miss Watkins next door checks on Ruth every afternoon. She doesn't knock. She just calls through the screen. If Ruth calls back, she moves on. If she doesn't, she goes in. Mr. Lewis from the corner drives Jalen to school on cold mornings. He doesn't ask permission. He just pulls up. When Kalia was sick last February, Mrs. Tate from the church made dinners for a whole week and left them on the porch in a cooler. No note, no name, no knock, because if Kalia sees a name, she'll try to pay it back, and if she can't pay it back, she won't eat it. Michael listened without speaking. That's how it works here, Mrs. Edna continued. You don't march up to somebody's door with a bag and expect them to be grateful. You don't get to decide what they need. You show up with time. You learn somebody's name. You come back on Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that, and the one after that. Rich people think help means writing a check. In this neighborhood, help means showing up and knowing somebody's name. The words settled into the small store like dust in afternoon light. Quiet, everywhere. Michael was still for a moment. Then he asked, How do I start Mrs.? Edna reached under the counter and pulled out a folded piece of bright yellow paper. She smoothed it flat on the counter between them. Community breakfast, it read. Hopewell Center, Saturday 8 a.m. All welcome. Miss Lorraine runs this, she said. Been running it for 12 years. Every Saturday morning she cooks breakfast for the neighborhood. Elders, children, anybody who walks through the door. Oatmeal, eggs, biscuits, coffee. Nothing fancy. But it's there. She tapped the flyer once with her finger. Kalia volunteers there. Every Saturday. She shows up early, sets up the chairs, ties on an apron, stands behind the counter and serves food to every person in line. She looked at Michael. She serves it. She doesn't take it. Michael stared at the flyer. She volunteers. Mrs. Edna nodded. That child gives more than most adults I know. She won't eat a plate herself, but she'll make sure every elder in that room gets seconds before she puts the lid on the pot. Michael picked up the flyer. He read it again. Saturday morning. Hopewell Center. 8 o'clock. Mrs. Edna watched him fold it carefully and slide it into his jacket pocket. If you go, she said, don't go trying to fix anything. Don't go with a plan. Don't go with your wallet. Just go. Sit down. Eat what they serve you. And see what happens. Michael nodded once. He stood up and pushed the chair back into its corner. He turned toward the door, then stopped. Thank you. Mrs. Edna put her glasses back on. She picked up her receipt box and opened it. Don't thank me yet, she said without looking up. You haven't done anything. Saturday morning came with the smell of eggs and coffee before Michael even reached the door. The Hopewell Center sat in the basement of an old church at the end of a block Michael had driven past 100 times without ever noticing. The sign out front was hand-painted, the letters slightly uneven, the blue paint chipped at the edges. The steps leading down were worn smooth in the middle from years of feet. A propped-open door let the sound spill out into the morning air. Michael stepped inside. The ceiling hung low. Long folding tables stretched across the room in rows covered with plastic tablecloths in red and white. Metal chairs scraped against the wood floor as people sat down, stood up, shifted, moved. The walls were cinder block painted a pale yellow that had probably been bright once. A bulletin board near the entrance was covered in flyers, announcements, a child's drawing of a sun taped at a crooked angle. It was loud, not chaotic. Alive. Children ran between the tables, weaving around legs and chair backs. An older man in a baseball cap sat near the window, laughing at something a woman beside him said. Two teenagers carried trays of biscuits from the kitchen, moving with the easy rhythm of people who had done this many times. A radio somewhere played gospel music low enough to sit under the conversation, loud enough to be felt in the chest. At the front of the room, behind a long serving counter made of two folding tables pushed together, stood a woman Michael could only describe as someone who had been in charge of things for a very long time and had no intention of stopping. She was tall, broad at the shoulders, with silver-streaked hair pulled up under a patterned wrap. Her voice carried across the entire room without strain. She called out names, pointed people to seats, directed volunteers with quick gestures, and greeted every person who walked through the door as if she had been waiting specifically for them. That was Miss Lorraine, and behind her, standing on a small plastic step stool to reach the counter, was Kalia. She wore an apron that reached past her knees, an adult's apron tied twice at the waist to keep it from sliding. She held a large metal ladle in both hands and was scooping oatmeal into bowls with the focus of someone performing a task that mattered. Each bowl was filled the same. Not rushed, not uneven, not heaped for some and shallow for others. Every scoop measured by habit and care. Michael walked to the end of the line. He did not announce himself. He did not look for someone to talk to. He simply stood behind a woman holding a toddler on her hip and waited. The line moved slowly. People talked to each other. An elderly man with a cane nodded to someone across the room. A girl about Kalia's age said something to the boy next to her, and both of them laughed. Nobody looked at Michael. Nobody needed to. Here he was not the man whose name was on buildings. He was just another person waiting for a plate. Kalia saw him. He was sure of it. Her eyes moved to his face for a single moment when he first stepped through the door. Then they moved back to the pot. She did not pause. She did not flinch. She did not react in any way that would separate him from the 40 people who had come before. When he reached the front of the line, she filled a bowl. She placed it on the counter in front of him. The oatmeal was thick and warm. A small square of butter sat in the center, already beginning to melt. Next, one word. No recognition. No warmth. No coldness. No special treatment. No less, no more. The same word she had said to every person before him. Michael picked up the bowl and found a seat at the end of a table near the wall. He sat down. He ate slowly. The oatmeal was simple and good. Cooked with patience. Seasoned with something he could not name, but that tasted like someone had cared about it. For the first time in years, Michael was not special. He was not important. He was not the man whose phone calls were returned on the first ring or whose handshake opened doors. He was just the next person in line, and something in him shifted. Not loudly, not with any great revelation. Just a quiet loosening of something he had been carrying so long he had forgotten it was there. When Michael finished eating, he did not leave. People around him were standing, carrying bowls to a plastic bin near the kitchen entrance. Nobody told them to. It was just what happened. The meal ended, and the room began to clean itself the way a tide pulls back and leaves the shore behind. Michael stood. He carried his bowl to the bin. Then he looked around. 2 volunteers were collapsing a folding table near the back wall. A woman swept underneath the chairs. A teenager stacked serving trays beside the sink. Michael walked to the nearest table and started folding it. Nobody asked him to. Nobody thanked him. He lifted the legs, collapsed the frame, and leaned it against the wall. Then he did the next one. He carried chairs. He wiped the serving counter with a damp cloth. He rinsed trays in the kitchen basin. The water was lukewarm, the soap cheap and sharp-smelling. His sleeves got wet. He rolled them higher and kept going. Miss Lorraine appeared beside him while he was drying a stack of bowls. "You, the man Mrs. Edna told me about." Michael looked at her. She called ahead. Miss Lorraine gave a short, dry laugh. "Honey, nobody has to call ahead around here. This neighborhood talks. You showed up at that girl's door with grocery bags. Whole block knew about it before you got back to your car." Michael set the towel down. "I was just trying to help." Miss Lorraine studied him. Her gaze was not hostile. It was experienced. The kind of look that came from 12 years of watching people walk through that door with intentions that sometimes lasted and sometimes didn't. "I know you were," she said, "but trying and helping aren't always the same thing." She nodded toward the far side of the room. Kalia was there, kneeling on the floor beside a small boy helping him tie his shoe. She said something to him, and he giggled. She smiled back, not the careful, controlled expression Michael had seen before. A real smile, open, unguarded. The kind of smile that belonged to a child who had for a moment been given permission to be one. "You see that," Miss Lorraine said. "This is where she gets to be a child. Right here, Saturday morning, 2 hours a week. This room is the only place where nobody needs her to be anything but 11 years old." She turned back to Michael. "Out there, she's the adult in her house. She cooks, she cleans, she does the laundry by hand because the machine's been broken for months. She manages money. She walks her cousin to school. She makes decisions every single day that no 11-year-old should have to make. Not because anybody told her to, not because somebody forced it on her. Because there is nobody else." Miss Lorraine paused, letting that settle. "When a child starts carrying the weight that's meant for grown shoulders, it changes them. It changes how they talk, how they move through a room, how they look at people who offer them things. Because they've learned that the world doesn't hand you something for free. It hands you something and then asks for something back, and most of the time what it asks for is more than what it gave." Michael was quiet. He looked at Kalia again. She had finished with the shoe. The boy ran off. She stood, brushed her knees, and began stacking chairs at the other end of the room. Quick, efficient, moving through the space like someone who had done this 100 Saturdays in a row. Miss Lorraine spoke again. Her voice was lower now. Not softer, just closer. "Don't try to save her. She doesn't need saving. She needs somebody who stays." Michael came back the next Saturday. He arrived at 8. He put on the apron Miss Lorraine handed him without being asked. He washed dishes. He carried boxes of donated canned food from the back of Miss Lorraine's van. He set up chairs before the first person arrived and broke them down after the last person left. He mopped a juice spill near the children's table without anyone pointing it out. When the breakfast was done, he wiped the counter, dried the trays, and took the garbage out to the dumpster behind the church. He did not try to talk to Kalia. He did not bring anything for her. He did not offer, suggest, or mention anything about money, groceries, or help. He just showed up. He worked, and when she walked past him carrying a stack of bowls, he said one word, "Morning." She did not respond. She kept walking. He kept working. He came back the Saturday after that. Same routine. The third Saturday it rained. Michael arrived with water on his jacket and mud on his sneakers. He tied the apron. He helped unload the van in the rain, carrying boxes through the back door while the wind blew sideways. His shirt was soaked by the time he got inside. He did not mention it. He just started setting up chairs. That morning when he said morning, Kalia gave a nod. Small, almost invisible. Just a slight dip of the chin as she carried a pot from the stove to the counter. But it was there. And Michael felt it the way you feel a change in temperature before you see the sun. The fourth Saturday was bright and cold. The room filled up faster than usual. Michael worked the serving line for the first time, scooping eggs, while Kalia handled the oatmeal beside him. They did not speak. They did not need to. They just worked side by side, filling plates and sliding them across the counter in a rhythm that required no conversation. After breakfast, while he was stacking trays near the kitchen door, Kalia stopped beside him. "You're still here." "Yeah, most people stop coming after the first time." Michael set the tray down and looked at her. "I'm not most people." Kalia did not respond. She stood there for a moment, holding an empty serving pan against her hip. Her expression had not changed, but something behind it had. A wall that had been solid was no longer solid. Not open, not gone, just thinner. Just thin enough to let a little something through. She turned and walked back toward the counter. But this time she did not turn away from him the way she used to. She just moved on. As if his being there had become something she no longer needed to question. Trust was not a door that opened. It was a wall that thinned one layer at a time so slowly that neither of them noticed until the light came through. Then, on a Saturday, in late October, Kalia did not come. Michael arrived at 8, same as always. He tied his apron. He helped Miss Lorraine unload supplies from the van. He set up chairs and wiped down the serving counter. But the step stool behind the counter was empty. The ladle sat untouched in the pot. Miss Lorraine noticed before he said anything. She checked her phone, Then she stepped into the hallway and called Mrs. Edna. The conversation was short. When she came back, her face had changed. Not panic, something heavier. The weight of news that was not surprising but was still heavy. Nana Ruth fell last night. Around 10, ambulance came and took her to Grady. Michael set down the towel he was holding. And Kalia, she's there, at the hospital, with Jalen. Michael took off his apron. He folded it and placed it on the counter. Miss Lorraine watched him move toward the door. She did not try to stop him. He drove to Grady Memorial. The emergency department was bright, crowded, and loud in the particular way that hospitals are loud. Not with shouting, with accumulation, voices overlapping, machines humming, shoes on tile. A television on the wall playing the news with no sound. The smell of antiseptic sat in the air, sharp and constant, layered underneath, with something older that never fully went away. Michael found Kalia in the hallway outside the orthopedic wing. She was sitting in a plastic chair against the wall. Her back was straight. Her hands were folded in her lap. Jalen was asleep across her legs, his head resting on her thigh, a thin hospital blanket pulled over his shoulders. She was not crying. She was not fidgeting. She was not looking at her phone or asking a nurse for information. She was simply sitting, eyes fixed on the closed door of a room down the hall, waiting the way she always waited, with patience that was not calm but was disciplined, the kind of patience a child builds when no one is coming to relieve her. Michael walked toward her. He did not speak. He sat down in the empty chair beside her. He placed his hands on his knees. He looked at the same closed door she was looking at. Neither of them said anything for a long time. The hallway was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of footsteps on tile. A nurse walked past. Then another. A stretcher rolled by somewhere around the corner. Then Kalia spoke. Her voice was low, steady, but thin at the edges, the way a voice sounds when it is holding more than it was built to carry. They said she might need surgery. On her hip. Michael nodded slowly. Okay. Kalia looked down at Jalen. She adjusted the blanket over his shoulder. A small motion. Automatic. Even here, even now, she was still taking care of someone. I don't know how to pay for that. It was not a request. It was not a plea. It was not the beginning of a sentence that ended with, "Can you help me?" It was the sound of a child who had carried everything she could for as long as she could and had finally reached the edge of what her arms could hold. She did not ask for help. She simply said out loud to the only person sitting beside her the fact she had been calculating silently since the ambulance doors closed. Michael sat with the weight of it. He did not rush to fill the silence. He let it breathe. He let her have the space to have said it without it turning into something she hadn't intended. Then he spoke, quietly. "I can help with that." Kalia turned her head toward him. Her eyes were the same dark, steady eyes that had looked at him across a grocery counter weeks ago, the same eyes that had studied him through a half-open door, the same eyes that had served him oatmeal without a flicker of special treatment. But something behind them had shifted. Not surrender, not weakness, just the particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from one night or one emergency, but from years of holding things together with nothing but will and routine and the refusal to let go. She looked at him for a long moment. The fluorescent light above them hummed. Down the hall a door opened and closed. Jalen shifted in his sleep, pressing his face closer against her leg. Then her voice came, quiet, firm, shaking just enough at the very edges to betray what it cost her to say it. "I said, I don't need your money, sir." Michael did not flinch. He did not argue. He did not lean forward or raise his voice or try to persuade her with numbers or logic or promises. He had heard that sentence twice before. The first time in a grocery store, it had been armor. The second time at her front door, it had been a wall. This time, it was something else entirely. It was a prayer dressed as refusal. A child saying no because she was terrified of what yes might bring through the door behind it. "I know you don't need it," he said. His voice was low, steady, matching hers. "But your grandmother does." Kalia's jaw tightened. The muscles in her neck pulled taut for a second, then released. "That's not the same thing." "I know it's not." A silence stretched between them. The hallway felt longer than it had a moment ago. The fluorescent light buzzed. A nurse pushed a cart past them without slowing down. Somewhere around the corner, a phone rang and stopped. Then Kalia said something Michael had not expected. something that changed the shape of everything he thought he understood. If you pay for it, they'll think we can't take care of ourselves. Michael looked at her. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the closed door of her grandmother's room. Her voice stayed low, but each word carried the weight of something she had turned over in her mind 100 times before this moment. They'll come, the people with the clipboards. They'll ask questions about the house. They'll see Jalen sleeping on the couch because there's no second bed. They'll see the tub where I wash clothes. They'll look at the kitchen and count how many cans are in the cabinet. They'll see Nana in the wheelchair and ask who takes care of the children. She paused, her hands pressed flat against her thighs. And when they figure out it's me, they'll say that's not enough. They'll say a child can't be the one holding it together. They'll take Jalen first because he's younger. Then maybe they come back for me. She swallowed once. Hard. The way a person swallows when the thing they are holding in their throat is not a word but a fear they have lived with for so long it has become part of their breathing. Michael felt the sentence enter him the way cold water enters the body. Not all at once, in waves. First the words, then the meaning behind them, then the world those words came from. A world where accepting a surgery could trigger a visit, where a visit could become an investigation, where an investigation could become a case file, where a case file could become a van pulling up outside the house and someone in a lanyard telling 2 children to pack a bag. He had lived his entire adult life in a world where asking for help was wisdom, where hiring someone to solve your problems was strategy, where every system he encountered was designed to serve him, protect him, clear the path in front of him. He had never lived in a world where the people who came to help were the same people who could take your family apart, where the line between support and surveillance was so thin that stepping over it happened before you even knew the line was there. He sat very still, his hands flat on his knees, the hallway humming around them, Jalen's small chest rising and falling against Kalia's leg. If this story is touching your heart, please like and share. Tell me where you are watching from and subscribe for more stories like this. Kalia was still looking at the closed door. Her hands had returned to her lap. The blanket had slipped again from Jalen's shoulder. She reached down and pulled it back into place without looking. The gesture was automatic. Even here, even now, even at the edge of everything she could carry, she was still carrying. Michael did not offer money again. He did not make a promise. He did not say it would be okay. He did not say he had a plan. He simply sat beside her in that bright, sterile hallway and let the silence hold what words could not yet reach. 3 times she had refused him, and each time she had taught him something he didn't know he was missing. That night, Michael sat at the kitchen table across from Sharon. The house was quiet. The dishes were done. The lights in the hallway were dimmed. It was the kind of silence that comes after a long day when neither person has the energy to pretend everything is simple. He told her what Kalia had said. All of it. The hip surgery, the money, the fear, the words that had landed hardest. They'll take Jalen. Maybe take me too. Sharon did not speak for a long time. She sat with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. She stared at the table, not at Michael, not at her phone, at the grain of the wood, as if the answer might be written somewhere in it. She's 11, Sharon said, finally. Her voice was low, and she's thinking about the system taking her away. That's not childhood. Michael nodded. Sharon looked up at him. What are you going to do? I can't give her money. She won't take it. And even if she did, it would put them at risk. The system doesn't care about intention. It cares about flags. And an outside payment for a surgery on a child's guardian is a flag. Sharon set the mug down slowly. Then don't give to her. Michael waited. Give to the community she already trusts. Don't put her name on anything. Don't make her the reason. Make it bigger than her. Make it something the whole neighborhood benefits from, so she's not a case. She's just a kid who lives there. Michael leaned back in his chair. He thought about the Hopewell Center, the folding tables, the plastic tablecloths, the step stool Kalia stood on every Saturday, the apron that went past her knees, the ladle in her hands, the way Miss Lorraine ran the whole thing out of a church basement with donated food and borrowed time. He thought about what Mrs. Edna had said. Rich people think help means writing a check. In this neighborhood, help means showing up and knowing somebody's name. And he thought about what Sharon had just given him. Not the check, the how. The next week, Michael called Miss Lorraine. He asked to meet. Not at the center, not in front of anyone. At Mrs. Edna's store on a Tuesday afternoon when the shop was empty and the fluorescent light buzzed its steady rhythm overhead. He sat in the cracked plastic chair. Miss Lorraine stood behind the counter, arms folded, listening. Mrs. Edna sat on her stool, watching both of them. Michael laid it out. He wanted to fund the Hopewell Center. Not for a weekend, not for a month. Long term. Enough to expand the breakfast program from Saturdays to every day of the week. Enough to add an after-school tutoring room with real desks, real books, and a paid tutor 3 days a week. Enough to bring in a community health nurse every Wednesday to do basic checkups, blood pressure, medication reminders, wellness visits. Free. No paperwork, no waiting list. Miss Lorraine listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked one question. Whose name goes on it? Nobody's, Michael said. No sign, no plaque, no logo. Miss Lorraine looked at Mrs. Edna. Mrs. Edna looked back. Something passed between them. The kind of understanding that doesn't need words because it was built over decades of shared ground. This belongs to the neighborhood, Miss Lorraine said. Not to a name. Michael nodded. That's the point. There was one more thing. Michael contacted a legal aid organization that operated pro bono in the county. He explained the situation without using names at first. A grandmother, a hip fracture, 2 children in the home, no private insurance. The legal team confirmed what Sharon had suspected. Nana Ruth qualified for Medicaid. The surgery could be covered through the state program. No outside payment required. No red flags. No CPS involvement. Just paperwork filed correctly by someone who knew how. Michael did not tell Kalia. He told Miss Lorraine. Miss Lorraine told Mrs. Edna. And Mrs. Edna, one Tuesday afternoon, sat down with Nana Ruth in her kitchen and helped her fill out the forms. Slowly, carefully. In blue ink, the same way everything important in that house was written. 2 months later, the Hopewell Center looked different. Not dramatically. Not the way a place looks when a corporation buys it and hangs a banner over the door. It looked different the way a house looks different when someone has been taking care of it steadily without announcing it. The changes were real, but they were quiet. The folding tables were still there, but beside them now stood a row of solid wooden tables against the far wall. Small, square, the kind meant for homework. Each one had a lamp, 2 chairs, and a cup of sharpened pencils. A bookshelf had appeared near the kitchen entrance, filled with donated paperbacks and a few new ones still stiff at the spines. Chapter books. Picture books. A small sign on the shelf read, "Take one, bring one back." It was written in a child's handwriting. Miss Lorraine said Kalia had made it. The kitchen had a new stove, 2 burners instead of 1, a refrigerator that did not rattle. The breakfast program now ran Monday through Friday, staffed by a rotation of neighborhood volunteers who had signed up after Miss Lorraine made one phone call. The community health nurse came every Wednesday, a woman named Denise who set up a folding table near the back and took blood pressure readings for the elders while the children finished eating. There was no sign with Michael's name on it. No plaque, no dedication, no logo on the napkins or the paper cups. Miss Lorraine had been clear about that from the start. This belongs to the neighborhood, she had said. Not to a name, and that was how it stayed. Kalia still volunteered. Every Saturday, same as before. Apron tied twice around her waist. Ladle in hand. She served oatmeal to every person in line with the same steady precision she had always brought. Nothing about that had changed, but something else had. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons after school, Kalia sat at one of the homework tables. A tutor named Mr. Warren, a retired teacher from the next neighborhood over, worked with her on math. Long division? Fractions. Things she had fallen behind on because there had never been time. She listened carefully. She asked questions. She erased mistakes and tried again without being told. On the shelf, she had found a book. A chapter book about a girl who traveled alone across a country she didn't know. She read it in pieces, 10 pages at a time, during quiet moments between homework and helping clean up. Michael had seen her reading it once, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the bookshelf, the book resting on her knee, her finger tracing the line she was on. She had not seen him watching. He had not interrupted. Nana Ruth's surgery happened in early December. Medicaid covered it. The forms had been filed correctly. Mrs. Edna had driven Ruth to the hospital herself, arriving early, sitting in the waiting room with a thermos of coffee and a crossword puzzle, as if this were something she did every week. The surgery was on her hip. It went well. The doctor said recovery would take time, but the pain would be managed. Ruth would still need the wheelchair for a while, but the fall would not happen again the same way. The joint was repaired. The bone was set. 2 weeks after the surgery on a Saturday morning, Nana Ruth came to the Hopewell Center for the first time. Miss Lorraine had saved a spot for her near the window where the morning sun came in warmest. Ruth sat in her wheelchair with a blanket across her lap and a plate of eggs and toast that someone had brought her without being asked. She watched the room. The children running, the elders eating, the volunteers moving between the tables, and Kalia, standing behind the counter, apron on, ladle in hand, serving. "Look at my girl," Ruth said quietly to Mrs. Edna, who had taken the chair beside her. Mrs. Edna nodded. She didn't add anything. She didn't need to. Michael arrived at 9 later than usual. He tied his apron. He started washing dishes. At some point during the morning, Kalia walked past him, carrying an empty pot to the sink. She stopped. Not for long. Just a pause in her stride. She looked at him. "Thank you." It was quiet. Quick. Almost not there. The kind of words that a person says when they mean something too large to explain and too important to dress up. She did not say what for. She did not need to. Then she kept walking. Michael stood at the sink, his hands still wet, watching her carry the pot back to the stove. He did not say, "You're welcome." He did not smile too wide or nod too deeply or do any of the things a man does when he wants his generosity to be seen. She didn't say what for. She didn't need to. One afternoon in late December, Michael stopped by the center after hours. The breakfast crowd was long gone. The homework tables were mostly empty. A few children played near the bookshelf. The lights were on, but low. The room had the quiet hum of a place settling into the end of its day. Kalia sat alone at one of the small tables near the window. She was drawing on a piece of notebook paper, her head bent close to the page, her pencil moving in slow, careful lines. Michael walked over and sat down across from her. She did not look up right away. She finished the line she was drawing. Then she set the pencil down and looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that two people share when they have already said most of the hard things and what remains does not require urgency. "Why did you keep coming back?" Kalia asked. Michael considered the question. Not because the answer was difficult, because the answer mattered, and he wanted to give it to her the way she had given him every honest thing she had ever said. Straight, without decoration. "Because you reminded me of something." "What?" "That help isn't something you give. It's something you earn the right to offer." Kalia looked at him. She did not nod. She did not smile. She held the words the way she held everything. With care, with weight. Then she said something he did not expect. "My mom used to say she'd come back. Every time she left, every time she said the same thing. 'I'll come back for you.'" Michael was quiet. He did not try to fill the space. "She never did," Kalia said. "Not once." Michael held her gaze. "I'm not your mom." "I know." A pause, long enough to feel the room breathe. "That's why I'm still talking to you." The sentence landed without force, without volume. But it carried more weight than anything either of them had said in all the weeks that had led to this moment. It was not trust announced. It was trust revealed. Quiet. Already there. Built not from promises, but from Saturdays. From aprons and dish soap, and showing up when no one asked you to, and not leaving when it would have been easier. Michael looked at the drawing on the table. It was a house. Small. Simple. A door. 2 windows. A porch light. And on the porch, 3 figures. One in a chair. One standing. One small. All of them facing outward towards something beyond the edge of the page. He did not ask who they were. He already knew. He came to change her life. She changed his. That evening, Michael drove home the long way. Through the neighborhood. Past Mrs. Edna's store, its lights off, the close sign turned inward. Past the church, where the Hopewell Center sat below ground. Its windows dark now, chairs stacked, tables folded, the room resting until Monday morning. He turned onto the narrow side street. He slowed. The house was there. The same cracked paint. The same potted plant on the step. The same small shoes by the door. But something was different. There was a light on the porch. A porch light. New. Warm. Not bright. Just steady. The kind of light that says someone is home, and the door is not locked, and you do not need to be afraid of what is on the other side. Kalia sat on the top step, a book open on her knees. The porch light fell across the pages. Beside her, Jalen sat cross-legged, drawing on the concrete with a piece of chalk. Behind the screen door, Michael could see the outline of a wheelchair, Nana Ruth, sitting just inside, close enough to watch, close enough to hear. Michael did not stop the car. He did not need to. He did not roll down the window or wave or honk. He just drove past slowly and looked. The light was on. The family was there. The girl was reading. And, for the first time since he had walked into that grocery store and watched a child put a banana back on the shelf, Michael understood something that no amount of money could have taught him. Some lights don't need to be turned on. They just need someone willing to see them. This story reminds us that respect is not the same as rescue, that some children don't need saving, they need to be seen, that true generosity is not measured by what you give, but by whether you listen first, and that the strongest people are not the ones who never ask for help. They are the ones who know the difference between help and pity. In the United States, over 2.5 million children live in households headed by grandparents. Many of them, like Kalia, carry responsibilities far beyond their age, not because they are broken, but because they are brave.